side towards the highlights. But if I move my cursor down into these shadow areas, you can see that hollow circle now has drifted down to the left end of the histogram. So here we're focusing on shadow pixels. If I move it up here, we're focusing on highlights. So it's very important to note that this is a live update and will continuously track where you're moving the mouse. When we want to edit the image, we simply click, and notice that when we click on the image area, we have this hand icon with the up and down arrows, but in the curves dialog box, that hollow circle has now turned into a solid black square. That means that point is selected, and if we drag up with the mouse, we're holding the mouse down and dragging up, we are brightening the image, and look at what happens to our curve. Now, in the curves window, we have changed the shape of this curve. We have raised it up above where this original diagonal line was. Whenever the curve goes above the line, those pixels are being brightened, and you can see that we brightened the image. If I were to go and drag this curve down, and as you can see, I can simply click to select a point, drag this down, the image gets darker. Look at the shape of the curve. It's now fallen below the diagonal line. I want you to pay attention too between the distance from the original diagonal to where we have made our new curve shape. Up in the highlights, you can see that the curve has bent below the original line, but by a relatively small amount. There's not so much of a difference up here between our new curve and the original. Whereas you can see as we get down into the midtones, and especially down around in this region, we have a much greater amount of space, which means a much greater change in brightness. In this case, a change in darkness. So that's how we work with the curves tool. We simply use this on image tool. We cycle it over a part of the image. We can see that hollow circle, and we click up or down to brighten or darken the image. Now, if that's all we could do to curves, it wouldn't really be that much more useful than levels. But the fantastic thing about the curves tool is that we can select and move multiple points. I'm going to go here, click on this point, and I'm going to drag it out of the window area to delete it. With our On Image tool selected, we're going to go up in the Clouds area. And I'm going to take a cloud area here. Notice my hollow circle is over in the highlight range. I'm going to click and drag up a little bit. That looks pretty good. Of course, the whole image is brightened now, but here's where the magic of curves comes into play. I can go down here into my shadow areas. I'm way down to the left end of the curve dialog window. I'm going to click and drag down. Down a little bit more, right about there. Now notice what has happened. In the shadow region, I have pulled my curve down below the original diagonal, so those pixels have gotten darker, while in my highlight end, my curve is above the original diagonal, meaning those pixels have gotten brighter. So I've done two separate things to the image. The bright pixels I've made brighter, and the dark pixels I have made darker. And notice the shape of our curve. It's fairly shallow, but it's still an S shape. I could enhance it a little bit more. I'll click here, open this up a bit, and maybe click down here and pull those shadows down a little bit so you could really see it look like an S shape. This will be a very familiar shape to you as you work with images in Photoshop, because this is the way to enhance contrast, to add contrast to an image. An S-shaped curve means that your highlights have gotten brighter and your shadows have gotten darker. What we've done so far has taken a few minutes of explanation, but in actual practice we're really looking at just a few seconds of work. Let's take a look at the preview by toggling it on and off to see just how far we've come. If I uncheck preview, here's where we started, a flat, low contrast, uninteresting, dull image. With just 2 points on the curve, however, we quickly go to a much fuller, richer, and dynamic image. And that's part of the beauty of working with the curves tool. So far we've talked about changing the brightness or luminance of pixels. Now we're going to look at how to change actual colors. We're going to open up a file in our Chapter 3 folder, Control-O on the PC, Command-O on the Mac. And in this Chapter 3 folder we are going to open Saturation. Pull that up on the screen, and like we did in the previous lesson, we are going to change the screen view to full screen with menu bar. So we can do that up here in the screen view switcher, full screen mode with menu bar. This is going to let us move it out of the way once we call up the Hue Saturation dialog box. To get to that, we go to Image, Adjustments, and Hue Saturation. We'll move this over here. Again, the space bar to temporarily invoke the hand tool. We'll slide this image over and move the Hue Saturation dialog box there. Now, when we talk about hue, we need to really understand what we mean. Hue we can think of as color. Saturation, on the other hand, is the intensity of the color. So we can have a single hue, a single color, and we can have that at various levels of intensity or various levels of saturation. Now, the Hue Saturation tool is fairly straightforward. We've got a hue slider, a saturation slider, and a lightness slider. For now, we're just going to concentrate on the first two. When we're set to the master mode like this, we can simply go, take the hue slider, drag it to the left, the image is going to get warmer. If we drag it to the right, the colors are going to get cooler. So that's pretty straightforward, but not very useful. There aren't that many times when you would want to just take the hue slider and drag it all the way to the right. One thing you will do more often, though, is adjust the saturation. If you wanted to add more saturation to this image, you drag this slider to the right. If you wanted to take saturation out, you drag it to the left. And if you dragged it all the way, you would take all of the color completely out of that image. Going to hit 0 here to set our saturation back to no change. But here's the great thing about this tool. Just like we did in Curves, we have an on-image adjustment tool. And if we click on it to highlight it and move the mouse over the image, we'll click on any particular color. Let's say I'm going to click on this green leaf, for example. Notice that the cursor changes into our hand icon, and this time the arrows go left to right. So if I simply click and drag to the left, notice that I am taking the saturation out, but I am only taking the saturation out of the color that I have clicked on, in this case the green leaves. So we're leaving a bunch of color in the petals and in the background, but these green leaves are losing saturation. We could drag it the other way to greatly saturate that, and we can quickly end up in a big old mess, but you can go any direction and you can isolate your change to a particular color by using the On Image tool. Now let's set that saturation back to 0. And how would we adjust the hue with this tool? Well, again, with the On Image Adjustment tool selected, we're going to click on an area of the image, but this time we're going to use a modifier key, Control on the PC, Command on the Mac, and if we Control Command click, now we'll notice that it's not the saturation that's changing, it is the hue. So we can change these leaves to a warmer hue, we could change these leaves to a cooler hue. So again, we've got a quick, fast, and easy way to isolate particular colors just by using the On Image Adjustment tool. I'm going to reset this value in the hue from 97 back to 0, and we can further refine the choices of colors that get moved and colors that do not get moved. On Image tool is selected down here. We're going to move over to the petals of the flower, click, and drag to the left. Now that's desaturating the petals, leaving the other colors alone. But suppose there are colors in this image that we would like to include in that desaturation effect. Well, if we look at the Hue Saturation dialog box, we've got 3 eyedroppers here down at the bottom, and I want you to pay attention to the last 2. One has a plus sign, one has a minus sign. We're going to click on this plus sign. We've got our Add Eyedropper, and if I go here to a different region of the image, let's say this background, this color is different enough from the petals of the flowers that it did not get moved. But if I simply click with the Add Eyedropper, it now expands the range of colors that are selected to include that background area, so that is automatically now desaturated to the same level as the petals of our flowers. So that's a great way to expand the range of colors that you want to desaturate in this case. If we wanted to take colors out of that range, we can simply go and choose the minus eyedropper tool, and we can simply click, let's go back on this background area, and we'll simply click the minus sign, and look at that. That's taking those colors out of our desaturation effect. Again, limiting it to the petals of the flowers. So you've got a lot of flexibility and precision here in the Hue Saturation dialog box. Let's take a look at how to crop and straighten an image. We're going to start with a file. We're going to open a file in our Chapter 3 folder. Let's go this time to the image titled Crop. We'll bring that up on screen. The tool we're going to use is named, appropriately enough, the crop tool. That's located here in the tool panel. The shortcut command for this is the letter C. And the easiest way to use crop is simply click and drag on an image. Once I let it go, I'm not committing to the crop. I can further refine this. I could say, well, that's a little bit too high. I'll bring it down. We could bring this out on the side, and we can move it freely anywhere we want in the image. Notice a few things in the options bar. We've got a crop guide overlay. Mine is set to none. Yours might be